Hello and welcome to the ThreeWill Podcast. This is your host, Danny Ryan. I have my co-host here with me, Tommy Ryan. How's it going, Tommy?
Wow. I've been promoted to co-host.
You are co-host.
I'm not a guest?
How's that feel? How does that feel? You're not a guest. You're not. You're the co-host.
Okay, awesome.
Congratulations. Let's do it. So let me see socks before we get nice.
These are not plain ones.
No?
They're pretty business-looking crazy.
Good.
Crazy
Business looking
business.
crazy. Nice. So today I wanted to get together with you and talk about something that I know I'm confused about. So hopefully we'll have some questions maybe as someone just looking at this as well.
And I'll have all the answers.
You'll have all the answers because that's what you do. You just have all the answers. It's come up with, I think, with clients. We've covered topics somewhat related to this, but never quite this one topic. And that topic is
Yammer versus Office 365 groups versus Teams, Microsoft Teams.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we've talked about, we've compared so these are all the Microsoft products, or not, because we've talked about like Slack before. But this is we're going to stick with
Chatter.
And Slack and Chat. Absolutely. So we're going to stick with the Microsoft stack, and so there's confusion within the stack, and so maybe can you give me a little bit of just to get started, some of the history of where the products came from, maybe just a little bit, and also if somebody's not aware of what the different products are, just get us started maybe with a little bit of a backstory.
Yeah, I think when you look at these are products that address social aspects, team collaboration aspects. You have things like Skype that are kind of IM capabilities of going one-on-one with people and having conversations. Like email is a asynchronous way. A synchronous way, to do that is in a phone call or maybe a chat session that allows you to kind of have that real-time collaboration. So these products have come from the desire to allow people to collaborate outside of email in a more of a just-in-time way. And so Yammer was that acquisition years back that gave Microsoft the ability to check that checkbox around social. But there were other things that have been in play in the Microsoft ecosystem to help with that group collaboration. You can even think back to SharePoint discussions as being something that even falls into the same category of group collaboration. And when organizations look at that today, and you're in the Office 365 ecosystem, you're seeing this thing called Office 365 groups. And that, does more than just, give you, collaboration. They call it conversations. When you look at an Office 365 group, you get other things provisioned. Well, that conversation piece that comes with Office 365 groups, you can also use things like Microsoft Teams to have that type of group collaboration. You can also use Yammer for that group collaboration. And so when people think about where do I go to have a group collaboration take place, there can be confusion, and there can be kind of a concern of, should I use Office 365 groups or Teams? Why would I use Yammer? So those things overlap, and I think maybe we can talk a little bit about where they have their place and how to kind of figure that out. And I don't think that all the answers are there.
Yeah.
I think Microsoft is testing the waters and seeing what gets traction.
Now, I'm most familiar with, I guess, just from the from using it for years, I'm most used to using Yammer. And I don't know if I use it so much. It's been more for across the whole organization than just sort of like team collaboration. So I'm probably most familiar with Yammer, and I think that's might have the early. When you look at that, I think early on we were comparing that with sort of SharePoint social features. And
right.
those, I think we're not even talking about the SharePoint social features now, even though some of them are still around. They're not even, I don't think they're utilized that much anymore. So now I'm confused, and
Okay.
I'm on my
I'm here to help.
I'm saying, yeah, I need to lay down on the couch. Doctor, I'm confused. So let's maybe start to break down, what are we using for which type of situation? How do we get out of this confusion, Tommy?
Well, it's going to depend on where your organization is at.
Okay.
What are the business drivers that need to have a group collaboration feature? And where do you get your work done? And so, some organizations, their approach it from, I need something social. I hear that these millennials need a way to communicate, and it's not email, and we need something that shows pictures of people and shows back and forth conversations, and something that feels closer to, say, something like Facebook. And then they look at Yammer. And so Yammer is that way to send a message that hits your whole organization. They've got this kind of group called All Company that you can send something out and everyone in your organization can see, or you can segment that down to a group of people that can be in a private context or a public context. So you can set up a group that might be technology. And so you have people in your organization that are involved with technology and some that are not. And you have some people that maybe are not involved with technology but are technology curious. And so you would set up a group that's more of an open group that allows people to go and filter down to that, context of technology. Mm-hmm. So that, that's Yammer. And I look at Yammer as more of the company bulletin board and having the ability to have conversations, and really everyone in the organization would participate in, and you have ways to kind of filter it down. Mm-hmm. If you're not interested in seeing everything and you want to hone in on a particular area of your company. Okay. So that's Yammer. And then what's come on the scene since Yammer is Office 365 groups and then Teams. And it's probably best to talk about Office 365 groups first, because that's the underpinnings to Microsoft Teams. And Office 365 groups is a broader concept than what Yammer provides for you. When you create a new Office 365 group, you get a few of the services of Office 365 provisioned for you. And it's done in the context of a security group. So you say, Danny, Pete, Tommy, we want to have a group to talk about something. Maybe it's a new white paper. And then we create this group and we invite those members. And as a part of creating that group, we can decide, again, is it public, is it private? And then we create that group. And now we have conversations as a part of that group. We have files, we have notes, and we have Planner. And those are just provisioning parts of Office 365 that you use today, either directly or through maybe SharePoint. So the notes, is a OneNote notebook for you. You also have Planner, which is, kind of task management, not the same as Microsoft Project, but a task management set of capabilities. And you have files, which is essentially like OneDrive or SharePoint, to be able to give you the document management capabilities. And then there's conversations, and that is provisioning Outlook as a way to do group collaboration. Different than Yammer. It's storing it in Exchange, and so you get more of an Exchange look and feel and experience. And that kind of comes with the Office 365 group. Mm-hmm. So now that we kind of understand what Yammer is and Office 365 groups, the next step that you can take, and this is something that's very, very recent, within the last year, say 6 months, is this concept called Microsoft Teams. And we talked about this before, where we compared Slack to Teams, because how people are getting work in our area of business and consulting and development, you see a lot of people using things like Slack to allow your team to be helping each other as they're heads down, developing things, and they want to ask questions, and they don't want to get up and walk across to the room or pick up the phone. They want to ask a question real quick and then go off to the next task. And then meanwhile, there's people kind of answering or collaborating around that concept. And in Teams, they've made that Office 365 group experience that provisions all these different aspects of Office 365 as a set of services, and puts it into an application. And that application is either in the form of a website or a client-side application that puts a kind of that single pane of glass to get around those services. So if you want to jump from your group collaboration or conversations to files to notes, it allows you to do that and keep the same kind of navigation trim around it. And you don't have that in groups today. It kind of throws you off into different areas as you navigate around. And so the Teams allows you to have more of a container to consume an Office 365 group. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of giving you the lay of the land. And where I think there's challenges when it comes to that concept of where do I go and start a conversation that needs to involve a group. Well, I can do that in Yammer, I can do that in conversations within Office 365 groups, or I can do it within the chat within Teams. Mm-hmm. And the chat within Teams does not get stored in the same area as the conversations in Office 365 groups. So it's very confusing because you have all these conversations that are stored in really 3 different locations. And hopefully we see over time this comes together and we see these conversations all in one place. Just like you see notes are all in one place. They're sitting in OneNote. So if I want to create a note in Teams or a note in Office 365 groups, it's in the same OneNote. If I want to create a file, it's in the same location in SharePoint for Teams and Office 365 groups. So I see this, we've got a new idea. It's a concept for collaboration, and it comes with these extra things. Well, extra things were nice when it stood by itself, mm-hmm. like with Yammer. But now that I bring it together with Office 365 groups, you say, well, I don't want to store a file in Yammer. When I store a file using the interface of Yammer, why don't you put it inside of SharePoint in that one location? And I think they're trying to address that. They're working on that, but that that takes time for those things to gel and come together. And I think they're trying to figure out, when you have a conversation, do people like the Yammer style of a conversation? Do they like the Office 365 group style of a conversation? Or do they like the team style of a conversation? And they all have their pros and cons. And as you know, Danny, in this world of Microsoft, the double-edged sword of what Microsoft does is they give you so many great things, but they give you so many great things, and they end up being overlapping, and you've got to make those decisions of which one do I choose, and I hope I choose the one that continues forward. and there's a little bit of a art in that, and kind of getting a sense of, okay, it seems like this is going to be the direction. I'm ready to hop onto that train. And I think we're advising companies that, yeah, groups are great. There's putting a lot of energy there, but you don't know. You don't know at this point, and you can, jump onto that train. And the nice thing about groups is, it's going into SharePoint, for the files. So SharePoint's going to be around. That seems to weather the storm. But when we have a conversation, there's so many competing ways to have a conversation. And we're not even talking about Skype. Skype is another one of those areas that, Skype for Teams. I think that ended up being Teams. And now you see, these competing technologies and which one is going to win. We wish we knew, but at this point in time, you just have to pick one that is going to be servicing your needs the best. And they all have their pros and cons. So you kind of look at, where are we as an organization? We're a large, Fortune 100 organization, or we're a startup. And then based on that culture and what's already in place in the organization, you're going to decide, okay, Yammer simplifies it for me. I'm going to turn on Yammer. We're going to turn off Office 365 groups and teams, and we're going to use a Yammer. Believe it or not, Yammer is the most stable of those platforms, and it was something considered very innovative, and now it's becoming more of legacy within the tool set of doing conversations. So I'm looking at the screen, and I've done a lot of talking, so I'm gonna.
Oh no!
I'm gonna wind down and let you ask a few questions. I mean, are you still confused?
It's clear as mud. Yeah, I mean, this has helped. A couple things that have come up. You were talking about how Office 365 groups is somewhat, it's like setting a security context. Does Teams use that security context, or is that a different thing? Or
it does. So if you create a new team, you're going to create an Office 365 group. So you get that context.
I guess I can just explain this from my point of view. We're a small company, and the way that we've set up our Office 365 is we have a site, and I'll just use an example, like a place where we keep all of our files for a certain account, and it's in a document library, and the document library has the account names at you can see them from the root of the folder, and then underneath that we have all of our documents. When I started using some of these is I would have sort of like I'd set up the group, and then that would provision a new document library, and then we'd sort of we'd start putting documents into that, but that wasn't ultimately where that document needed to be, or it wasn't sort of. It seemed like there was it was a working area, but there wasn't anything. It sort of broke our current structure of having files underneath in this account's document library, and so there wasn't. So it's sort of I think we kept on we're reverting back to sort of all of the files for accounts are stored there. I think at one point in time I sort of took those files and dragged them out, basically moved them over. I think I had to do a little bit of downloading them and moving them over so that they were there for the long term. But it just seemed like it wasn't like a smooth workflow for me.
Yeah,
to sort of set up a group, work together. Then some of those files needed to go into another location. I still have. Some, for some of the RFPs that we've done, we've created the Office 365 groups, and they're still out there. And they're sort of like they're a branch that we've broken off that never got decommissioned. But just trying to figure out sort of what is that workflow of working together within these teams, and then I think the documents end up going somewhere else, or even like if we look at our OneNote, we have a OneNote for sales, we have a OneNote for marketing, and then it has that structure within that OneNote document, or within that OneNote notebook. Then we're creating, by creating these groups, we're creating a bunch of little OneNote notebooks that don't have the structure of what we have in our sales and marketing. So I'm confused, and I'm sorry I'm sort of using this for trying to scratch my own back here and talking about my own problems, but I just see maybe this is a micro microcosm of what even happens in larger organizations, because they probably have even more structure than we do.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that you're grappling with is a key concern or a key thing to kind of figure out in terms of what is best. And when you look at, let's say, our sales documents, we have sales pursuits, and you could see having a team. We do have a team that organizes around a sales pursuit. And if we did that within an Office 365 group and it had a team, we use the Teams interface to get to that, it would be nice to kind of go after that as a team and feel like, okay, we've got our own place to do this.
Yep.
But when you get to the end of that, where does that information go? Because if you need to retrieve that, if you have records that are produced out of that process of, I've got 20 documents and maybe 5 of them need to be records that get put in a location that I can retrieve them at a later date. That's, not a natural progression using Teams or Office 365 groups. It seems to get orphaned unless you have someone with the discipline to say, let me think about what needs to live beyond this pursuit, that we're finished. We either won or lost the pursuit. And what do we do with this information? Do we depend on using search to find it and show us that it's in this team? Or do we want to move it into a structured area that people navigate to it and know that, okay, our contracts are inside of the sales, sales site within the contracts document library, and it's organized, by the account. Well, that's the way we work. So, if I were to try to find that contract and it's in a team, then one, that team needs to be structured the same way every time, so I know where to go look within that team.
Yep.
And then I'm going to have to, from a navigation standpoint, think about, well, what was the name of that pursuit so I can go to the right group, or let me go to search and then find it that way. And I think we have leaned towards keep it in that structure. And if we do, create a group to get that collaboration capability, then we're going to have to remember to move those documents. And I think that's where, some of our automation can take place to say, okay, you're at the end of this and you're doing a retrospective. What do we need to harvest out of this? And let's have, a standard way of saying anything that gets dropped in this folder within the team, we're going to run this script or run this, app to go pull those, and based on naming convention, it gets put in the right place. But the cobbler has no shoes, so we can't afford to do that for ourselves. So we say, how do we simplify? Well, let's use things like, Yammer and SharePoint and email to be able to collaborate around that, to know where that exists, know when it's ready for me to review, and then that's how I collaborate. And I think we have a desire to get more things into groups and to be able to feel like you're a team. Everybody likes to be a part of a team, and that's our culture. We like to create the environment of, things can get done very well with high effective teams, small, highly effective teams. So that concept of a Office 365 group or Microsoft Teams is very appealing to us. So we're in early stages. We're doing it with our project teams, and that seems to make the most sense, because project teams that have this life cycle of we're getting this work together as a team and we're delivering what we need to the customer as output that comes out of that team and gets sent as an email and packaged up to our customer. And then all the work product along the way, we have that in the team that we can kind of have as an archive and have it in the context of the conversations and all the information that we gathered for that engagement. And we rarely need to get to that. And when we do, it can surface in search. But things like a sales document, that I always have to go back and look at, okay, what was the last contract that we had? What is the MSA? What is the expiration date on that? All that stuff, we want to be able to go to one place to get to that versus having to find, where's that team that has that. Mm-hmm. So I think if you have a clean, today, if you have a clean life cycle of, I am starting this work, and when it's done, it can stay within that team, and I'm fine with that, and I can discover it through search or knowing which team to go to, then that's fine. But if it really needs to reside in another location, you either have to have the discipline to deprovision that team appropriately and move the content into the right place, or you start putting in some automation to say, okay, I know when I finish this, I can easily get this into the right location.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. Back to I think in my mind, trying to sort of put this together, you were mentioning earlier on that this is sort of Yammer as the bulletin board. I think that makes a lot of sense to me, because I think it's sort of my place where if I wanted to put praise or put something out there for a group of people, whether it be the all company or within a certain other group that I want to sort of put a message out there, that makes a lot of sense to me. And then I was sort of thinking, okay, well, what are the other, I think of like teams is sort of like when you get together in a conference room and sort of need to work together in a place for a period of time. Right. And then I think of, okay, well, the document libraries where we keep our contracts are sort of like the physical file cabinet. It's like once we're done with these things, they need to go somewhere. And so if there was a physical analogy, it would be like the file cabinet. So it has to have structure. You have to have a way of getting back to it long term. So it's sort of, I just imagine in the office, it's sort of like, what am I trying to do? And then the one-to-one, conversations, often for me, I think what ends up happening is when there's so many different options of what to use, you go back to the least common denominator, which is email, and you just sort of come back to that, and you often right now, and I think like using the @ mentions and things like that, it's even like they're trying to incorporate some of the social features into email, which is interesting to see them do that. But it's just I see like. Working on new opportunities, like you want to start to put the team together. You want them to all, I really see like ideally we have, from the first call that we have with a prospect, that information is flowing through to the project, to the closeout and the retrospective, and, where we have more of a smooth transition of information. And I think right now we're trying to capture a lot of like capture this in notes as far as what our calls were with people, and starting to store our working files and in the accounts folder, and files for a certain opportunity, we're keeping those into a folder structure as well. It'll just be interesting. I'm interested to see sort of how this evolves, and when do I end up saying, okay, well, I just got a good solid prospect coming in, and going and creating a group with Bruce and letting Bruce pull in the right people to that team, and then sort of seeing that evolve over a period of time.
Yeah, and I think if you're going to use a group is not a good location for a record. So things that need to go back into the file cabinet. So, that analogy of you got a desk and you got all these papers and you're doing all this work, and then what are the things that you want to keep, and what do you kind of throw in the trash can? And the things that stay in the group, I almost consider it as that's the trash can, and it's not shredded. I can go back and pull it out of the trash can. Sure. And it's not that organized, and I can probably find it if I really wanted to find it. But if I want to have the efficiency of, I know I can always go here to find this type of information, then you need to take it from that group and get it into some structure. And I think you need to make that conscious effort. When I'm done with this group, I'm done with this sales pursuit, I'm done with this project, is there anything that I need to reference at a later date? and let's make sure we have a defined structure of where that goes. And then you can, decide to keep that team around, because the nice thing about the team that you don't get when you put it in just a structured document library is you don't get the context. You don't see the conversation, thread around that, and you don't see all the notes around that. And that can be helpful if you're really trying to do some detective work. But for the average person that just needs to get to the file, that can be just a lot of clutter. And all you want is a simple file structure that's almost analogous to what you have in your own laptop, where you can actually just drill down and get that file. And why I think things like Dropbox work so well, or things like Dropbox and say OneDrive, is I can get to it just like it's, at my fingertips. I don't have to, get complicated in terms of how I find it. I just drill down into that folder structure and I get that document. So it's interesting. I think, that transition, there's things like flow that, might be able to help us out when you get to a point and say, okay, I'm ready to close down this project. And then based on how you structured the group, it can pull out the information, or maybe just give you a reminder to say, make sure that this and this and this document goes to this and this location.
So this is probably something, when we look, especially with teams, I know we were kicking the tires, right? And then it goes kind of quiet for a period of time. And I'm just wondering, that's great because everybody's busy on projects. But I think the teams who are using like Slack have started, and I think Microsoft's starting to do some of the integrations with Teams as well, is sort of pulling in the right information at the right time. But I'm just interested to see also sort of when do we start seeing people where it's more common for seeing teams work together within Microsoft Teams. And just I don't know if I'm stating something or asking a question.
Yeah, I think we're using Slack, and I think we'll use Slack for a while until Teams gets rich enough. And I think they had a great first start at it, and hopefully we continue to see the efforts towards making that a richer experience. And we are continuing to kick the tires. Our last project with a big, data processing company, we created an Office 365 group and a team around it to allow us to continue to kick the tires. I think, especially when you say we're real busy, being real busy, it's hard to, break old habits. You tend to go down to the least common denominator of the things that you're using on a day-to-day basis, and the mental energy to say, okay, how should I do this in this new way? It takes more work, it takes more effort, and we've got certain folks that like to noodle on those things, and certain folks that say, just tell me what the standard is, and that way I know where to put it. And we'll have that healthy tension as we get to the point where we say Teams is the standard. And maybe it won't be, but we're definitely in that process of figuring out how do we make it easy. So when we talk to our customers, we can help them figure out, how do I make it easy?
Well, I feel like I have a better handle on this, so I appreciate that.
Good.
That is, I definitely feel like I'm, and I know this is an evolving topic too, so just recognizing that as well.
Definitely it is.
Awesome. Well, thank you for taking the time to do this, Tommy.
Sure.
And thank you everybody for listening, and have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Adios.